Today, one of country music's it couples is officially calling it quits. Blake Shelton and Miranda Lambert have announced their divorce after 4 years of marriage.
Blake Shelton once joked that buying a gift for Miranda Lambert was nearly impossible. She was successful, independent, and had everything she ever wanted. The ones she didn't have, well, she could easily buy them. So, what exactly could one get a woman who had everything?
We try so hard to keep people's focus on what we do and not our marriage. You know, it's almost impossible.
For Blake, it was a love like no other, and he and Miranda became one of country music's most watched couples. Fans loved watching him and Miranda's relationship unfold publicly together. They were hands-on, the kind of couple you'd see holding hands on the streets. However, behind the picturesque image, private realities differed greatly. Fans saw awards, red carpets, and laughter, rarely the strain of two demanding careers. So when their relationship unfolded, it came as a huge shock. Why did this power couple split? And what was the secret gift Blake gave Miranda that drove her to tears? Let's find out. A country music love. Before we jump right into the juicy details, let's get a bit of the backstory down. By the time Blake Shelton and Miranda Lambert crossed paths, both were already familiar names in country music, although they were at different stages of their careers. Blake, known for his baritone voice, playful interviews, and a string of successful singles, had already established himself as a mainstream country star. Miranda, on the other hand, was building a reputation as a sharp, emotionally honest songwriter whose music carried an edge that set her apart. Regardless of where they both were in their careers, the duo ran in the same circles. And as time went on, their worlds began to cross paths. Their connection was not an immediate public spectacle. It grew quickly and quietly, grounded in mutual respect's work. But as quiet as their relationship was, Blake couldn't help but openly admire Miranda's songwriting. He'd praise her talent in interviews and even gush about how great a singer and songwriter she was. Miranda, in turn, saw Blake as someone who understood the demands of the industry she was navigating. He was more experienced than her in the industry, wiser, perhaps, and certainly a good asset to have in her corner. At the time they met, both had been through previous relationships and didn't exactly have the best experiences. It was one of the reasons they chose to carefully approach this one. By the time they eventually found a rhythm and stuck to it, the couple knew it was time to share their love with the world. As their relationship grew and became public, it was met with warmth rather than skepticism. What stood out to fans and fellow artists was how natural the couple appeared together. They shared a similar sense of humor, a deep love for country music, and when they spoke about each other, it often sounded unguarded. Their love transitioned to the stage where they often performed together. When they weren't, they attended events as a couple, and even spoke openly about how much they enjoyed working within the same musical world. Unlike what some critics believed, there didn't seem to be any sense of competition between them. If anything, they appeared proud of each other's success. It's probably one of the reasons their early years together felt very balanced. Blake's laid-back, humorous personality complemented Miranda's intensity and focus. She was driven and deeply invested in her craft, while he approached fame with a lighter touch. In interviews, Blake often joked about being the lucky one, while Miranda described their bond as supportive and grounding. For fans, their relationship felt genuine. It didn't at all look like a carefully managed public image, or some stunt to keep both artists relevant. It all just seemed like two musicians who just understood one another's realities. They knew the long nights on tour, the pressure to keep producing music, and the emotional toll of constant visibility. This way, it was easier to give each other grace and forgive where necessary. Just like that. What began as admiration slowly turned into commitment. And as their relationship deepened, so did the sense that this was more than a passing connection. Forget simply dating within the same industry, or even just for the fun of it. They were building a life while navigating careers that demanded almost constant movement. From the outside, their story looked steady and promising. It felt like the beginning of something meant to last, rooted in shared values, shared work, and a genuine affection that was easy to see. And for the while that it lasted, it was all this: falling fast and hard. As Blake and Miranda's relationship grew more serious, it moved with a confidence that suggested both knew what they wanted. Their connection deepened quickly, and by 2010, Blake proposed. Later that year, they were married, choosing a private ceremony rather than a large public event. The decision felt kind of like a representation of how they often handled their relationship: visible, but protected where it mattered most. When you looked at Blake and Miranda in those early years, you didn't see two polished Hollywood statues. You saw a couple that actually seemed to like each other. Marriage didn't turn them into a stiff corporate brand. Instead, it felt like a high-speed chase where they were both in the front seat, laughing the whole way. At award shows, they were each other's loudest fans. When Miranda took the stage, Blake was there in the front row, beaming as he'd just won the lottery himself. He mastered the proud husband look, supportive, but never trying to steal the spotlight. In interviews, too, they had this easy, rhythmic banter. Blake was usually the one cracking self-deprecating jokes, happily playing the role of the country boy who got lucky, while pointing to Miranda as the real visionary in the house. Behind the scenes, their musical worlds didn't just coexist, they bled into one another. It's rare to find a partner who truly gets the weird, lonely pressure of a blank page or a sold-out tour, but they had that in spades. Miranda leaned on Blake's perspective when the industry got loud, and Blake admitted that Miranda's raw, unapologetic songwriting pushed him to be better. He was the entertainer. She was the poet. It shouldn't have worked as well as it did, but his playfulness acted as the perfect foil to her grit. What made people root for them, though, was what many referred to as the normalcy of it all. They talked about their dogs, their quiet nights in Oklahoma, and the boring routines that kept them sane while their names were up in lights. It was also around this time that Blake laid his funny complaints about how impossible it was to buy Miranda a gift because she was so rich. It was a joke, sure, but it hit on a deeper truth. Miranda didn't need a pedestal. She wanted someone who understood the woman behind the platinum records. Back then, there were no cracks in the foundation, at least none the world could see. They looked like a team that had figured out the secret code to surviving fame. It was a partnership built on humor, a bit of dirt, and a lot of mutual respect that felt like it could weather any storm. But sometimes, either by choice or an error, we often lose the best things in our lives. And for this couple, the end was way closer than they thought. The end of the road. For a man who never quite knew what to get his wife, when it came to gift-giving, Blake tended to go big. He often leaned into custom-made jewelry and high-end luxury to mark their milestones. And while he was known for his country boy persona, his gift-giving style was much more aligned with his status as a major television star. One of the most significant known gifts was the $1.2 million diamond set Miranda wore on their wedding day. The set was a curated collection from celebrity jeweler Jonathan Arndt. It included a 5-carat white diamond Eternity wedding band, a massive 30-carat 3-tier diamond necklace, and matching teardrop earrings. Beyond the wedding, Blake continued to use jewelry as his primary way of celebrating Miranda. For Valentine's Day in 2012, he gave her a custom-designed hummingbird ring. The piece was oversized and encrusted with pink and white pavé jewels, modeled after a specific design Miranda had mentioned liking a year prior. He also frequently commissioned pieces that reflected her personal interests. For Christmas one year, he spent $20,000 on a heavy gold charm necklace. He had the jeweler engrave 20 individual charms, each one featuring the name of a different rescue dog Miranda owned at the time. The couple also exchanged massive physical assets as their wealth grew. In 2014, they bought a $2.26 million mansion in Brentwood, Tennessee. The estate was 10,000 square feet, sat on an Arnold Palmer-designed golf course, and featured 5 bedrooms and 8 bathrooms. For their 3rd anniversary, Blake's gift was more mechanical. He knew Miranda's boat at Lake Texoma was broken, so he spent the day fixing the engine himself. When she returned from an album press tour, he had the boat fueled up and ready on the water so she could use it immediately. Even their casual gifts were high-end. During a trip to Las Vegas, Blake reportedly bought her a platinum and diamond M pendant worth several $1,000s just because they were passing a high-end boutique. By the time they reached their 4th anniversary, the gifts had scaled up alongside Blake's The Voice salary. He was known to buy her designer bags and pieces of fine art for their Oklahoma ranch, often picking out items during his time filming in Los Angeles and bringing them back to the Midwest. Unfortunately, at the time, Blake and Miranda weren't just a couple. They were 2 separate empires. The togetherness people loved had been replaced by a grueling bi-coastal tug-of-war. Blake had become a massive crossover star on The Voice. He was living in Los Angeles, surrounded by Hollywood gloss, playing a character that was always on. On the flip side, Miranda was doubling down on her country music identity. She was winning every Female Vocalist of the Year award in existence by writing about heartbreak, whiskey, and the dirt roads of Oklahoma. You had the happy-go-lucky TV star versus the tortured country poet. And those 2 worlds don't usually share a dinner table. The cracks showed up in the logistics. While Blake was filming in LA, Miranda was often back on the ranch or on a tour bus. They were living what many called airport lives, short, high-pressure reunions between flights. When they were together, the public expected them to be the fun, beer-drinking couple from the 2011 CMAs, but you could see the exhaustion behind the smiles. Just like that, the shift in their public language became noticeable. Interestingly, in early interviews, Blake would joke about being Mr. Miranda Lambert. Later, eventually, the jokes felt sharper and fell flat. Miranda started giving interviews where she'd say things like, "I'm not sunshine and roses," almost as a warning. She was leaning into a heavy introspective sound with her album Platinum, while Blake was leaning into mainstream pop country. Their fallout never quite reached the level of fighting in the streets, but they were growing into people the other didn't quite recognize anymore. It wasn't one big scandal, but the slow realization that they were sustaining a brand more than a marriage. Just like that, the silence between them wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy. And by the time the rumors started swirling, the fire wasn't just out. The wood was damp. The split. In July 2015, Blake and Miranda announced that they were divorcing after 4 years of marriage. Their statement was short and measured. They asked for privacy, expressed respect for one another, and avoided assigning blame. There were no accusations, no hints of betrayal, and no attempt to explain what had gone wrong. Their words were careful, thoughtful, and with an awareness of what should remain private. Even so, the news hit hard for fans. From the outside, their marriage had seemed solid. They had celebrated awards together, shared moments on stage, laughed in interviews, and appeared as a united front at red carpets. To people watching, the separation came as a shock. But for those paying attention quietly, the signs had been there. Long tours keeping them apart, schedules that rarely overlap, and moments of private reflection that never made headlines. As expected, in the absence of concrete information, speculation grew. Social media and entertainment outlets offered endless theories, some reasonable, others far-fetched. Blake and Miranda largely stayed out of the discussion. They did not answer rumors, nor did not explain their feelings to the public. Instead, they returned to their work. Miranda poured herself into songwriting and recording, channeling her thoughts and emotions into music. Blake continued performing, touring, and making public appearances. And although many believed their silence was avoidance, it seemed more like consistency to others. Throughout their marriage, the duo had rarely aired personal matters for public judgment, and the divorce did not change that. In keeping their story private, they allowed themselves space to process what had happened without needing approval or validation from anyone else. It's easy to overlook just how restrained they were. There were no fiery statements, no public blame, no dramatic confrontations. What they shared was a simple acknowledgement that the marriage had ended and that it had been difficult. And that speaks to an important truth. Not every relationship ends in a single dramatic event. Sometimes love fades gradually, not because of betrayal or anger, but because life shifts, priorities diverge, and the structure that once supported two people no longer fits. These kinds of endings are quiet, sometimes imperceptible, and often misread by the outside world. The public, of course, responded with noise. Fans speculated endlessly, media outlets debated reasons, and social media exploded with opinions. But all of it missed the point. For Blake and Miranda, the divorce was not a headline or a scandal. It was the natural conclusion of a life shared over years, shaped by love, effort, and ultimately change. Even without public resolution, the ending closed a chapter in their personal and professional lives, one that had helped shape who they had become. While the world analyzed and debated, they moved forward quietly. Only later, as Miranda's music and Blake's reflections emerged, did the deeper significance become clear. The divorce was not just an ending. It created space for understanding, growth, and a chance to become themselves again. The secret gift. In the months following the divorce, the focus shifted from what had ended to what came next. Miranda did not immediately explain the emotional weight of that transition, but it showed up clearly in her work. When she released The Weight of These Wings in 2016, the album reeked of self-examination. Although the songs were not written to explain a marriage or assign responsibility, they explored themes of loneliness, resilience, and the process of standing alone again. In later interviews, Miranda described that period as difficult, but also formative. She has said that the marriage changed her in ways that were not easy, but ultimately meaningful. That acknowledgement matters. It positions the experience not as something to overcome quickly, but as something that reshaped her understanding of herself. For her, the loss became a period of reassessment rather than retreat. And perhaps this was the greatest gift Blake ever gave her. The divorce did not bring relief. It came with grief, confusion, and public scrutiny. But distance often reveals things that proximity hides. With time, what the ending created was space. Space to make choices without compromise. Space to reconnect with parts of herself that had been compressed by shared structure and constant motion. Obviously, the clarity did not arrive all at once. It came through work, through writing, and through living alone inside her decisions. Miranda did not frame this as liberation from a person. She instead framed it as learning how to exist more honestly within her own life. So the ending was less of a victory and more of a turning point. For Miranda, the end of the marriage created the circumstances under which she could listen to herself without interference. Even though Blake did not set out to give that kind of gift, the most lasting thing to come from the marriage may have been the understanding that followed its end. For Miranda, the gift might not have been freedom in the abstract, but rather self-recognition. And that recognition would quietly shape everything that came after. What happened next? After the divorce, both Blake and Miranda moved forward individually. Miranda returned to music with renewed focus. The weight of these wings captured her experiences and marked a period of creative independence. She continued to write songs exploring life, love, and self-discovery. The work was introspective and deliberate, showing a woman who was processing her past while moving toward her own future. In her personal life, Miranda also took steps to establish stability and choose relationships that aligned with her evolving sense of self. Her remarriage several years later was evidence that she was approaching love differently, not as a continuation of what she had lost, but as a deliberate choice, built on understanding herself more fully. Blake, too, experienced his own period of growth. He continued his music career, maintained a public presence, and eventually found a more settled personal life. He spoke openly about the challenges of adjusting to the divorce and acknowledged the time it took to process the ending of a relationship that had been meaningful. Like Miranda, he moved forward without revisiting the past publicly, allowing the experience to inform his understanding of relationships without defining them. And even though the fans still clamor for a sense of what once was, it's clear that this duo has found peace in their respective lives. What are your thoughts? Tell us in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this.